The alarm screamed through the bridge of the horizon's edge at 3 in the morning, ship time. Captain Vincent Hayes jerked awake in his quarters, his coffee mug from the night before clattering to the floor. Red emergency lights painted everything the color of blood. All hands, brace for impact. The automated voice was calm, which made the warning somehow worse. Vincent ran barefoot down the corridor, his heart hammering. Through the viewport, he saw the planet rushing up to meet them, Meridian Prime. They weren't supposed to be anywhere near Meridian Prime. That was forbidden space, dragon territory. The ship shuddered and groaned like a dying animal. Metal tore. Someone screamed. Then everything went dark. 3 days later, the rescue mission arrived. Captain Vincent Hayes of the rescue vessel Northern Star stood on the bridge, alive when his namesake was not. The coincidence of sharing a name with the dead captain felt like a cruel joke. He studied the scanner readings and felt his stomach drop. "Sir, we have a problem." Lieutenant Danny Crawford looked up from his station, his young face pale. "The crash site is right in the middle of Sector 7. "That's Drakvorn nesting ground," Vincent said quietly. Everyone on the bridge went silent. The Drakvorn were nightmares made real. Massive creatures that could survive in the vacuum of space, breathe fire hot enough to melt battlecruiser hulls, and move faster than anything their size had any right to. They'd been around longer than most civilizations. Humans had encountered them exactly 4 times in 200 years of space travel. 3 of those encounters ended with destroyed ships and no survivors. In the 4th time, humanity got smart and ran away. "Scan for life signs," Vincent ordered. Danny's fingers danced across his console. He frowned, checked again, looked up with confusion written all over his face. "Sir, I'm reading 1 human life signature. Just 1. And it's not at the crash site." "Where is it?" "Deeper in. About 15 kilometers into the nesting zone, right where the largest heat signature is located." Vincent felt ice slide down his spine. The largest heat signature would be a Drakvorn, and not just any Drakvorn. "Pull up the records," he said. "Tell me which one." The computer searched. The answer came back within seconds. "Vexrith the Crimson," Danny read, his voice cracking slightly. "Age estimated at 40,000 years. Responsible for the destruction of the Kelvin battle fleet in 2028. I-1700 confirmed kills. Threat level classified as extinction event. Approaches absolutely forbidden under galactic law." The bridge was so quiet Vincent could hear his own heartbeat. "That survivor won't be alive much longer," said Lieutenant Karen White from her station at Weapons. "We should recover the bodies from the main crash site and leave before we attract attention." Vincent wanted to agree. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to turn the ship around, but he kept thinking about that single life sign. Someone had survived 3 days in hell. Someone was still breathing, still fighting, while their crew lay dead. "Take us in," he said. "Slow and steady, weapons cold. We don't make any aggressive moves." "Sir, this is suicide," Karen protested. "Noted. Take us in anyway." The Northern Star descended through Meridian Prime's atmosphere. The planet was beautiful in a deadly way. Purple vegetation covered rolling hills. 3 moons hung in a green-tinted sky. Crystalline formations jutted from the ground like teeth. And everywhere, scattered across the landscape, were the Drakvorn nesting sites. Massive cleared areas with enormous mounds of precious metals and gems. Dragons didn't just sleep on treasure and fairy tales, apparently. They really did it. "Life sign dead ahead," Danny called out. 2 kilometers. Vincent could see it now through the main viewport. A clearing larger than 20 football fields. In the center, piled high with gold and platinum and stones that glittered like stars, was the nest. And coiled on top of it was Vexrith. The dragon was enormous. Yes, its scales were deep crimson, like dark rubies, each one the size of a dinner plate. Wings folded against its sides could have covered a city block. The tail, thick as a cargo transport, wrapped around the treasure pile 3 times. Steam rose from its nostrils with each breath. But Vincent barely noticed any of that. His eyes locked on the tiny figure sitting in the curve of the dragon's foreleg. "Dear God," Danny whispered, "that's a baby." The child couldn't have been more than 6 months old. She wore a dirty pink jumpsuit and sat playing with something shiny she'd pulled from the hoard. As they watched, she laughed, a sound they couldn't hear but could see in the way her whole body shook with joy. Vexrith's massive head lowered. The dragon's eyes, each one larger than the child's entire body, focused on the approaching ship. Or those eyes were ancient and intelligent and utterly terrifying. The dragon's mouth opened slightly. Fire glowed deep in its throat. "Shields up," Karen said automatically. "Shields will be interpreted as hostile," Vincent said. "Hold position. Don't do anything." The baby grabbed onto one of Vexrith's claws, using it to pull herself to standing. She wobbled on unsteady legs, then plopped back down onto her bottom. Instead of crying, she laughed again. The dragon's attention shifted back to the child. The fire in its throat dimmed. One massive claw, tipped with a talon that could slice through starship armor, gently steadied the baby. "It's protecting her," Danny said in disbelief. "Vexrith is protecting the human baby." Vincent watched the most dangerous creature in known space carefully arrange its tail to keep the child from rolling off the treasure pile. He watched those ancient eyes soften when they looked at the infant. He watched something impossible. "Get me everything we have on that child," Vincent ordered, "and someone contact the Galactic Council. They're not going to believe this." The Galactic Council chamber was built to hold 5,000 representatives from across known space. Right now, it felt like all 5,000 were shouting at once. Ambassador Krell slammed 3 of his forearms against his podium. The Vorian's skin flushed angry purple. "This is unacceptable. A human child in the possession of the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. We must act immediately." "Act how?" Exactly?" Admiral Patricia Cross stood calmly at the human delegation's platform. She was a small woman with gray hair and steel in her voice. "You want to start a war with Vexrith? Please, enlighten us on your battle strategy." Krell's mouth parts clicked in agitation. "We have weapons, technology, numbers." "The Kelvins had all of that too," Patricia said quietly. 1,700 of them died in 6 minutes. Their ships were more advanced than anything we have now. Vexrith tore through them like paper. The chamber erupted in arguments again. Some delegates demanded military intervention. Others suggested negotiation, though no one knew how to negotiate with a creature that hadn't spoken to another species in 10,000 years. A few, mostly from species who had lost ships to the Drakvorn, simply wanted to abandon the child and hope Vexrith forgot about humanity entirely. Patricia listened to all of it and felt tired. She'd been in service for 40 years. She'd seen wars, plagues, and political disasters. But she'd never seen anything like this. Her communicator buzzed, a message from Dr. Alan Price, the xenobiologist she'd assigned to observe the situation from orbit. She read it quickly, then held up her hand for silence. "Dr. Price has new information," she announced. "I'm patching him through." The main holographic display flickered to life. Alan appeared, a thin man in his 50s with wild brown hair and eyes that hadn't slept in days. Behind him, monitor screens showed different angles of Vexrith and the baby. "Council members," Alan began, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and excitement. "Yeah, I've been observing for 72 hours straight. What we're witnessing is unprecedented. Vexrith isn't just guarding the child. The dragon is parenting her." He pulled up footage. The council watched as Vexrith flew away from the nest, moving with terrifying grace despite its size. The dragon returned hours later with a massive creature in its jaws, something that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros. "That's a thornback grazer," Alan explained. "Herbivore, non-toxic. Vexrith killed it quickly with minimal suffering, then processed the meat carefully." The footage showed the dragon using the tip of one claw with surprising delicacy, cutting away small portions. The dragon is providing appropriate food for a human infant. The next clip showed nighttime. The baby was crying. Vexrith's chest began to glow softly, harsh, and heat radiated in controlled waves. The temperature, Alan noted, was exactly 72 degrees. Perfect for human comfort. The baby stopped crying and fell asleep. "Environmental regulation," Alan said. Threat elimination. The screen showed Vexrith destroying a pack of smaller predators that came too close. And education. In this clip, the dragon was making low rumbling sounds while the baby watched, fascinated. I believe Vexrith is teaching her. Speaking to her. Krell stood again. This proves nothing except that we're running out of time. Every day that child spends with that monster, she's in danger. Is she, though? Patricia asked. By every measure we have, that child is safer than she would be anywhere else in the galaxy. She's warm, fed, protected by something that could fight off an entire battle fleet. Show me a human facility that can match that. Before Krell could respond, alarms blared through the council chamber. A new ship had just entered the system. The identifier came through, and Patricia felt her blood run cold. Corinthian Empire battlecruiser. 3 escort destroyers. Heavily armed. What are the Corinthians doing here? Someone demanded. Patricia already knew. The Corinthian Empire had been pushing boundaries for years, testing other species, looking for advantages. If they thought they could capture Vexrith or control the dragon somehow, they'd try it. Ethics had never stopped them before. Back on Meridian Prime, something else was happening. Captain Vincent Hayes stood on the ridge overlooking Vexrith's territory. Next to him was a woman who'd barely stopped crying for 3 days. Sophie Chen had been found in the wreckage of the Horizon's Edge. Crushed legs, broken ribs, burns across 30% of her body. She should have died. The medical team said only pure stubbornness kept her alive. That's my baby, Sophie whispered. Even from this distance, she could see Lily through the binoculars. That's my Lily. Mrs. Chen, Vincent said gently, you're not strong enough for this. Let us handle it. Sophie looked at him with eyes that had seen the end of everything and survived anyway. Captain, I crawled through fire to save my daughter. I gave her to that dragon because it was the only choice I had left. Now I'm going to walk down there and get her back. Vexrith will kill you. Maybe. Sophie pulled herself up straighter, leaning heavily on her crutches. But I'm her mother. If that dragon understands anything, it should understand that. Vincent wanted to stop her. Every regulation, every protocol, every bit of training said he should physically restrain this woman and evacuate immediately. Instead, he found himself asking, "What do you need from us?" "Nothing," Sophie said. "Just wait here. If this works, I'll need help carrying her back up the ridge. If it doesn't work, tell my sister that I loved her and I died trying." She started walking before Vincent could respond. Step by painful step, leaning on crutches because her legs were held together with metal pins and hope. She walked down the ridge, across the purple grassland, toward the clearing where the most dangerous creature in existence watched over her child. Vexrith's head rose. Steam poured from the dragon's nostrils. Those ancient eyes locked onto Sophie, and the temperature in the entire valley seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sophie kept walking. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't stop. She reached the edge of the clearing and called out in a voice that barely carried, "Lily! Baby, it's Mama!" The baby's head turned. Even from the ridge, Vincent could see the moment of recognition. Lily's face lit up and she started crying, reaching out with both arms. Vexrith moved between Sophie and the child. The dragon's shadow fell over Sophie like nightfall. Fire glowed in that massive throat. Sophie didn't run. She looked up at the dragon, at the creature that could end her with a breath, and said something Vincent couldn't hear. The dragon stared at her for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, impossibly, Vexrith lowered its head and stepped aside. Sophie ran the last 20 feet. She dropped the crutches, fell to her knees, and scooped Lily into her arms. Mother and daughter held each other and cried while a 40,000-year-old dragon watched. And in orbit above, Corinthian warships prepared their weapons and descended toward the planet's surface. Dr. Alan Price couldn't sleep. While most of the observation crew rested in shifts, he sat glued to his monitors, watching the impossible scene below. Sophie Chen held her daughter in the shadow of a dragon, and somehow all 3 of them were still alive. "You need rest," said Lieutenant Karen White, bringing him a fresh cup of coffee. She'd volunteered to stay on observation duty, unable to look away from the drama unfolding on the planet's surface. "I need answers," Alan muttered. He pulled up file after file on his screen. Historical records, linguistic analysis, behavioral studies, anything about the Drakvorn? None of this makes sense. Vexrith has killed thousands. Why protect one human baby? Karen leaned against the console. Maybe the dragon's gone soft in its old age? 40,000 years old and suddenly develops maternal instincts? Alan shook his head. No, there's something we're missing. Something in the initial contact that created this bond. He scrolled back through the crash site footage, frame by frame. The Horizon's edge had broken apart on impact. The crew section separated from the main hull, tumbling across the landscape. Most of the crew died instantly. But the emergency pod containing Sophie and Lily had survived. Barely. Alan enhanced the images, following the trail from the pod. Sophie had crawled. He could see it now in the disturbed soil. The drag marks, the blood. She'd pulled herself nearly 2 kilometers with a baby in her arms and a broken body. She was heading toward Vexrith's nest, Alan said slowly. Look at the trajectory. It's a straight line. Why would she do that? Karen asked. She must have known what lived there. Alan pulled up Sophie's personnel file. Education history, training. Then he found it. She's a xenoanthropologist. She studied ancient cultures across the galaxy. She would have known the old stories about the Drakvorn. He accessed the historical database, searching through legends and myths from 100 worlds. The Drakvorn appeared in many of them, always as destroyers, always as terrors. But in the oldest stories, the ones that predated spaceflight, there was something else. Why, here, Alan said, pointing at the screen. This is from the Valar archives, over 15,000 years old. It talks about the Drakvorn before they withdrew from galactic society. They had rituals, codes of honor. Karen read over his shoulder. The sacred trust. A parent facing death could offer their child to a Drakvorn warrior for protection. If the dragon accepted, the bond was unbreakable. The child became kin. Sophie didn't just stumble to Vexrith's nest, Alan said, his voice filled with wonder. She performed the ritual. She was dying, she knew she was dying, and she crawled to the most powerful being on the planet and offered her daughter. And Vexrith accepted. They stared at each other, understanding dawning. This wasn't a random act of mercy. This was an ancient compact, a sacred vow that transcended species. Vexrith hadn't chosen to protect Lily on a whim. The dragon was bound by laws older than human civilization. Alan immediately sent his findings to Admiral Patricia Cross and the Council. But before anyone could respond, new alarms shrieked through the observation ship. Multiple contacts, the radar officer shouted. Corinthian warships entering atmosphere. On the surface, Captain Vincent Hayes saw them coming. 4 ships descending in attack formation, their weapons already charging. He grabbed his communicator. Sophie, get back to the ridge now. We have incoming. Sophie looked up from where she sat with Lily. She saw the ships, and her face went pale. She struggled to her feet, but her injured legs wouldn't support her and the baby's weight together. Vexrith saw the ships, too. The dragon's head snapped up. Its wings, folded for days, suddenly extended to their full, terrifying span. The membrane between the bones glowed like stained glass filled with fire. Vexrith's roar shook the ground, a sound so deep and powerful that Vincent felt it in his bones from half a kilometer away. The Corinthian ships deployed their weapons. Neural dampeners, designed to shut down Drakvorn nervous systems. The technology had cost them millions of credits from black market dealers who swore it had been tested successfully. The dampeners hit Vexrith with enough force to drop an elephant. Blue energy crackled across the dragon's scales. Vexrith shook it off like rain. The dragon launched into the air with impossible speed for something so massive. One moment it was on the ground. The next it was among the Corinthian ships, moving like death itself. Vincent watched in horrified awe as Vexrith dismantled the first destroyer. The dragon's claws punctured the hull in precise locations. The engines, the weapons array, the bridge. Not random destruction, surgical strikes. The ship went dark and started falling. its descent slowed by emergency repulsors but clearly disabled. The second destroyer tried to run. Vexrith's tail whipped around and caught it mid-flight, crushing the rear section. The ship spun out of control but remained airborne enough to limp away. The battlecruiser fired everything it had: missiles, plasma cannons, particle beams. Vexrith flew through the barrage, wings tucked, body twisting between the attacks. A few hits landed, scorching those crimson scales, but the dragon didn't slow down. Vexrith hit the cruiser from above, landing on its back with enough force to crack the armor plating. The dragon's claws found purchase, and with terrifying strength, Vexrith tore open the hull like opening a can. But the dragon didn't kill the crew. Vincent watched through his binoculars as Vexrith carefully extracted the command pod, the section where the Corinthians would be, and set it on the ground far from the battle. Then the dragon destroyed the rest of the ship, ensuring it would never fly again. The final escort destroyer transmitted a desperate message on all frequencies. "Retreating! We surrender! We're leaving!" Vexrith let it go. The dragon watched until the ship cleared the atmosphere, then returned to the ground near Sophie and Lily. The entire battle had lasted 4 minutes. Sophie sat frozen, her daughter clutched to her chest. Vexrith landed nearby with surprising gentleness, barely disturbing the ground. The dragon was breathing hard, smoke trailing from its nostrils. Blood seeped from a few wounds where the cruiser's weapons had penetrated scales. Lily reached out toward the dragon, making worried sounds. The baby had seen Vexrith hurt and didn't like it. Vexrith lowered its massive head close to the child. Lily touched the dragon's snout with one tiny hand. The gesture was tender, trusting, completely unafraid. Sophie found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for protecting her. For protecting us." The dragon's eyes, ancient and knowing, shifted to Sophie. Vexrith rumbled deep in its chest, a sound that wasn't quite language but carried meaning nonetheless. The message was clear enough. The child was under Drakvorn protection now. Anyone who threatened her would face the same fate as the Corinthians. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't negotiable. This was forever. In orbit, Alan watched the recordings of the battle, analyzing every movement, every decision Vexrith made. The dragon had shown perfect control. Overwhelming power paired with precise restraint. It could have killed everyone in those ships. Instead, it disabled them and let survivors escape. "Sending a message," Karen said quietly, watching over his shoulder. "Yes," Alan agreed. "A very clear message to the entire galaxy." Within hours, the footage spread across every inhabited system. The council reconvened an emergency session. Ambassador Krell, still arguing for intervention, found himself alone. Even his own delegation backed away from the idea of confronting Vexrith. Or Admiral Patricia Cross stood before the council and made it official. Lily Chen is hereby recognized as being under Drakvorn protection. Any attempt to remove her from Vexrith's care or to harm her will be considered an act of war against the Drakvorn species. No one voted against it. No one dared. On Meridian Prime, Sophie sat with her daughter in the shadow of a dragon, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Lily babbled happily, playing with a piece of crystalline treasure Vexrith had given her. Everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same. News traveled fast in the galaxy, but bad ideas traveled even faster. Commander Zaid of the Corinthian Empire sat in his command chamber, watching the footage of Vexrith destroying his ships for the 100th time. His long fingers drummed against the armrest of his chair. Where others saw disaster, he saw opportunity. "The dragon cares about the child," he said to his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Torque. "That makes it vulnerable." Torque shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with respect, we just lost 3 ships. High Command has ordered us to abandon this operation." "High Command is afraid," Zaid said dismissively. "They don't understand what we have here. A creature powerful enough to destroy fleets, potentially under our control if we possess what it values most. The child." "Exactly." Zaid leaned forward. "We don't fight the dragon. We take the girl quietly, from a distance, when the dragon is away hunting. Then we make demands. Vexrith serves us, or the child suffers." Torque looked ill. Sir, you threatening a child is against every treaty we've signed. Treaties are words on paper, Zaid said coldly. Power is what matters. Imagine what the Empire could accomplish with a Drakvorn as our weapon. We could dominate 3 sectors within a year. He began making plans, pulling his remaining loyal ships into position. Zaid didn't report to High Command. He told himself he was showing initiative, that he'd be rewarded once he delivered results. In truth, he'd gone too far to turn back. His career was over if he returned empty-handed. He just needed the right moment. On Meridian Prime, Sophie Chen had moved into a temporary shelter near Vexrith's territory. She couldn't leave Lily, but she also couldn't live on a treasure pile in the middle of a dragon's nest. The compromise was a small prefab building on the ridge, close enough to visit daily, but far enough to have human amenities like walls and running water. Captain Vincent Hayes had stayed too, along with a small crew. They'd set up a research station, officially to study the Drakvorn-human bond. Unofficially, they were guards, though everyone knew they couldn't actually stop anything if Vexrith got angry. Dr. Alan Price arrived on the surface 3 days after the Corinthian attack. He stepped out of the shuttle carrying equipment cases and barely controlled excitement. I need to document everything, he told Sophie when they met. This is the most important xenobiological discovery in history. How Vexrith communicates with Lily, what the dragon teaches her, the nature of their bond. Sophie looked tired. She'd been spending every day with Lily, trying to maintain their mother-daughter relationship while a 40,000-year-old dragon watched. She's not a science experiment, Dr. Price. She's my daughter. I know, Alan said gently, and I promise to be respectful. But Sophie, what's happening here could change everything we understand about the Drakvorn, maybe even open dialogue between our species. Sophie considered this. Vexrith has been making sounds when Lily's around. Patterns. I think the dragon is talking to her. Alan's eyes lit up. May I observe? They walked down to the clearing together. Vexrith was there, as always, with Lily playing in the curve of the dragon's foreleg. When Lily saw her mother, she squealed with delight and crawled forward. Sophie picked up her daughter and held her close. Vexrith watched with those ancient eyes but didn't interfere. The dragon had learned over the past week that Sophie would always return Lily. Some trust had formed between woman and dragon, fragile as spider silk but real. Alan set up his recording equipment at a respectful distance. He watched as Vexrith began the sounds Sophie mentioned. Deep rumbles that came from the dragon's chest, varying in pitch and rhythm. Lily listened intently, her small face serious. Then the baby tried to copy the sounds. Her attempts were clumsy, nothing like the dragon's voice, but Vexrith responded with what Alan could only describe as encouragement. The dragon rumbled softly, repeated the pattern more slowly. Language, Alan breathed. Vexrith is teaching her Drakvorn language. Over the next 2 weeks, Alan documented something remarkable. Lily was learning at an impossible rate. At barely 8 months old, she could make sounds that approximated Drakvorn words. She responded to Vexrith's calls. When the dragon left to hunt, Lily would cry until she heard Vexrith's return roar, then calm immediately. But it went both ways. Vexrith was learning too. The dragon began to understand human gestures, human expressions. When Sophie looked worried, Vexrith would rumble soothingly. When Lily was tired, the dragon adjusted the nest's temperature without being asked. They're forming a real family unit, Alan reported to Admiral Patricia Cross via secure channel. Not owner and pet. Not even guardian and ward. This is mutual, reciprocal bonding. Patricia listened to his reports with growing hope. If humans and Drakvorn could form these connections, maybe the age of fear and isolation could end. Maybe species that had been enemies for millennia could find common ground. She didn't know that Commander Zaid was listening to every transmission, learning Vexrith's patterns, planning his strike. Zaid watched and waited. He noted that Vexrith left the nest every 3 days to hunt, usually for about 4 hours. The dragon never went far, always staying within visual range. But there was a window, a brief period when Lily was guarded only by humans. He assembled a strike team. 8 soldiers, all equipped with stealth suits and tranquilizer technology designed for human children. They would drop in fast, take the girl, and be gone before anyone could react. By the time Vexrith returned, they'd be off-planet. "What about the mother?" Torque asked. "Unfortunate casualty if she interferes," Zaid said without emotion. "Daksh, we're not here to play nice. We're here to secure a strategic asset." The day came. Vexrith left on a hunting flight, massive wings carrying the dragon toward the northern mountains. Zaid's team descended in a stealth shuttle, invisible to standard sensors. They landed 200 meters from the research station. The soldiers moved quickly through the purple vegetation, professional and silent. They had thermal imaging showing exactly where everyone was. Sophie and Lily were in the shelter. 3 researchers nearby. Captain Vincent Hayes in the makeshift command center. The lead soldier reached the shelter door. He overrode the lock with practiced ease. The door slid open silently. Sophie sat in a chair, feeding Lily from a bottle. She looked up and saw armed soldiers in her home. Her face went white with terror. "Z, don't scream," the soldier said, raising his weapon. "Hand over the child and you won't be hurt." Sophie pulled Lily closer. "No. We're not asking, Mrs. Chen." 2 soldiers moved forward. Sophie tried to run, but she was still injured, still slow. They grabbed Lily from her arms. The baby started crying, a sound of pure fear and confusion. Sophie screamed. She fought with everything she had, but broken legs and healing ribs were no match for trained soldiers. They pushed her down and headed for the door. Captain Vincent Hayes burst in, weapon drawn, but he was 1 man against 8. They stunned him before he could fire a shot. The soldiers ran for their shuttle with Lily screaming in their arms. They were 50 meters away when they heard it. The roar. Vexrith hadn't gone north. The dragon had circled back, or some instinct warning of danger. Now the dragon came down from the sky like vengeance itself, fire already building in that massive throat. "Go, go, go!" the lead soldier screamed. They ran. The shuttle was right there, so close. They'd almost made it. Vexrith landed between them and their ship. The impact shook the ground like an earthquake. The dragon's wings spread wide, blocking their escape. Fire dripped from Vexrith's jaws, scorching the earth. This time, the dragon's eyes held no restraint. No mercy. Only fury beyond measure. The soldiers dropped Lily and ran in different directions, pure panic overriding training. Vexrith could have killed them all in seconds. But the dragon had a different priority. Vexrith's head lowered to where Lily lay crying on the ground. The dragon's nose, larger than the child's entire body, they nudged her gently. Lily grabbed onto Vexrith's face and held on, her cries fading to hiccups. Only then did Vexrith turn attention to the soldiers. The dragon's tail swept in a wide arc, knocking them down like bowling pins. Claws pinned them to the ground, careful not to pierce but impossible to escape. The dragon held them there while Sophie limped out of the shelter. She fell to her knees beside Lily, checking her daughter for injuries, crying with relief when she found none. In orbit, Commander Zaid watched his plan fall apart. He'd lost. Worse than lost. He'd proven every fear about the Drakvorn justified while accomplishing nothing. Within the hour, Corinthian High Command had him in custody. His career wasn't just over. He'd faced trial for war crimes. And across the galaxy, on every species received the same message loud and clear. Lily Chen was untouchable. The most dangerous dragon in existence would burn worlds to keep her safe. 2 years changed everything. The research station on Meridian Prime had grown from a handful of prefab buildings to a proper settlement. Scientists, diplomats, and curious visitors from across the galaxy came to witness the impossible friendship between human and dragon. But they came respectfully now, with permission, following strict protocols that Vexrith enforced with nothing more than a warning look. Lily Chen was nearly 3 years old. She walked with confidence now, her small legs carrying her across the clearing between her mother's home and Vexrith's nest like she owned the whole planet. In many ways, she did. Nothing on Meridian Prime would dare threaten a child under Drakvorn protection. She was talking too in 2 languages. Human words came easily, taught by Sophie and the researchers who'd become like extended family. But she also spoke Drakvorn, the ancient rumbling language that no human had ever learned before. When Lily called out to Vexrith, the sounds that came from her small throat shouldn't have been possible, yet somehow they were. Dr. Alan Price had published 7 papers on the phenomenon. He still didn't fully understand it. "Mama, look!" Lily called out one morning, pointing at the sky. Sophie looked up from her garden, where she was trying to grow earth vegetables in alien soil. 3 shapes moved across the clouds. Dragons. Not as large as Vexrith, but still massive and terrifying to anyone who didn't live here. "I see them. Oh, baby, stay close to me." But Lily wasn't afraid. She'd grown up with dragons. She waved at them like they were neighbors. The 3 Drakvorns circled lower. They were young by dragon standards, probably only a few thousand years old. They'd been appearing more often lately, watching from a distance. Vexrith tolerated their presence but didn't encourage it. Today was different. Today, they landed. Sophie felt her heart race as the 3 dragons settled on the ridge above the settlement. Captain Vincent Hayes came running from the command center, weapon ready, even though everyone knew it would be useless. "Should we evacuate?" he asked. Before Sophie could answer, Vexrith emerged from the nest. The great dragon moved between the settlement and the newcomers, a living wall of crimson scales and ancient authority. Vexrith's roar echoed across the valley, a clear challenge. The 3 young dragons lowered their heads in submission. They didn't retreat, but they made themselves smaller, showing respect. Lily tugged on her mother's hand. "They want to see, Mama. They want to know." "Know what, sweetie?" Lily struggled to find the English words. "About us, about family." Vexrith showed them we're good. They want to learn too. Sophie looked at her daughter in amazement. Lily understood the dragons in ways that went beyond language. She felt what they felt, knew what they meant. The bond with Vexrith had opened something in her, some connection to the Drakvorn species itself. Alan appeared at Sophie's side, recording equipment already in hand. "This is it," he said breathlessly. "This is first contact. Real contact. And if those dragons came here out of curiosity rather than aggression, it means Vexrith's actions are influencing the entire species." Over the next weeks, more dragons came. They kept their distance at first, watching from the mountains and the sky, but gradually they came closer. They observed how Vexrith interacted with humans. They saw Lily, a tiny child who laughed and played without fear under the protection of the most powerful dragon alive. The younger Drakvorn were curious. A few even tried to communicate, rumbling sounds directed at the human researchers. Alan and his team worked frantically to build a translation matrix, comparing Lily's words with Drakvorn vocalizations. Progress was slow, but real. They learned that the Drakvorn word for small fire also meant hope. The word for treasure hoard was the same as memory. The dragons thought in ways human minds struggled to grasp, but through Lily, bridges were being built. Admiral Patricia Cross arrived on Meridian Prime 6 months after the first young dragons appeared. She came with a proposal that would reshape galactic politics. "We want to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Drakvorn," she told Sophie and Alan in a private meeting. "But we need Vexrith's cooperation. More than that, we need Lily." Sophie's protective instincts flared immediately. "My daughter is not a political tool." "I'm not asking her to be," Patricia said gently. "But she's already the bridge between our species. That happened the moment Vexrith accepted your sacred trust. So now we need to make it official, make it lasting. We want to propose a cultural exchange program. Humans learning from Drakvorn, Drakvorn learning from humans. And Lily as the first ambassador. She's 3 years old. She speaks fluent Drakvorn. She understands them in ways we never will. I'm not asking her to negotiate treaties or make policy decisions. I'm asking her to do what she already does naturally. Be herself. Show both species that coexistence is possible." Sophie looked out the window at Lily, who was currently trying to teach a young dragon how to play catch. The dragon, easily 20 times her size, was carefully batting a ball back to her with the tip of one claw, clearly terrified of hurting the small creature. "I need to talk to Vexrith," Sophie said finally. The great dragon listened as Sophie explained the proposal, with Lily translating the complex parts into Drakvorn. Vexrith was silent for a long time, steam rising from ancient nostrils. Finally, the dragon spoke. The rumbles were long and complicated, but Lily translated. Vexrith says the Drakvorn left the galaxy because the young races made war on everything, including each other. They were violent and greedy and didn't understand honor. But humans showed something different. A mother's sacrifice, trust given to a stranger. These are old values, dragon values. Lily paused, listening to more rumbles. Vexrith says, if humans want to learn, the Drakvorn will teach. But there are rules. No weapons in dragon territory, no lies, no broken promises. Honor must be real, not just words. Patricia nodded solemnly. Agreed. We'll draft a formal treaty based on those principles. The first Drakvorn human treaty was signed 3 months later. Not in some grand council chamber, but on Meridian Prime, in the clearing where everything began. Lily stood between Admiral Patricia Cross and Vexrith, her small hand touching the dragon's claw, while she held Patricia's hand with the other. Young dragons watched from the ridges. Human diplomats stood in careful formations. And across the galaxy, billions watched on live feeds as a 3-year-old child became the most important diplomat in known space. Vexrith says we're family now, Lily translated, her voice small but clear. Families protect each other. Families teach each other. Families don't break promises. Patricia spoke clearly, her words recorded for history. The human race accepts this bond. We promise to honor the Drakvorn, to respect their wisdom, and to learn from their example. We offer friendship built on trust, not fear. Vexrith roared, a sound that shook the ground and echoed to the stars. The other dragons answered, dozens of voices joining in a chorus that hadn't been heard in 10,000 years. It was approval. It was acceptance. It was the sound of a new age beginning. 5 years later, Lily Chen stood before the Galactic Council. She was 8 years old now, tall for her age, with her mother's eyes and a confidence that came from growing up between worlds. Behind her, coiled in the massive space the council had built specifically for this purpose, was Vexrith. Council members, Lily said in perfect standard galactic, I come with proposals from the Drakvorn Conclave. The council chamber, in which once had shouted in fear and anger over her existence, now sat in respectful silence. Lily had spent 5 years learning, growing, becoming the bridge between species that Admiral Patricia Cross had envisioned. She spoke of joint exploration missions, combining human innovation with Drakvorn knowledge of ancient space. She proposed educational exchanges, human children learning alongside young dragons. She outlined trade agreements for resources that Drakvorn didn't need but humans desperately wanted. Every proposal passed unanimously. No one refused when Vexrith's eyes glowed softly in the chamber's light. After the session ended, Lily found her mother waiting in the gallery. Sophie hugged her daughter tight, still amazed at what her desperate choice in a crashed ship had led to. You did great, baby. Vexrith helped, Lily said. Atius, the dragon always helps. They walked together to the observation deck where Vexrith waited, too large to fit through normal corridors. The dragon's massive head lowered to touch Lily's forehead gently, a gesture of affection that had become familiar over the years. Sophie watched her daughter and the dragon, the bond that shouldn't exist but did. She thought about that terrible day when she'd crawled through fire, broken and dying, to place her baby at a monster's feet. She'd saved Lily's life that day, but in doing so, she'd saved so much more. She'd proven that honor existed across species lines. That trust could bridge impossible gaps. That sometimes the most dangerous creature makes the most devoted family. The galaxy had changed because a mother loved her daughter enough to trust a dragon. And the dragon had loved them both enough to show an entire species that maybe, just maybe, the young races were ready to learn. Above them, human ships and Drakvorn flew together through the stars, beginning explorations that would reshape the map of known space. Below them, on Meridian Prime, human children played alongside young dragons, learning each other's languages, building friendships that would last lifetimes. And at the center of it all was one small girl who spoke the language of dragons and taught them to speak the language of hope.